In the summer of 2015, Crystal Rogers, a mother of 5 from Bardstown, Kentucky, vanished after visiting the farm of her boyfriend Brooks Houck. Days later, her car was found abandoned, with the keys, phone, and purse still inside. From that moment on, her family began a desperate search for answers that would stretch for nearly a decade. For years, local police found little solid evidence, but every dismissed lead, every ignored detail, became vital to a case that would later be reignited by federal investigators. Shocking revelations, and a resolution no one expected. A resolution that exposed a web of silence, manipulation, and a delayed but undeniable justice. Crystal was not just a missing person. She was a mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend, and behind her absence was a chilling truth that took years to come to light. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what clue do you think was ignored the longest in the Crystal Rogers case. Crystal Rogers was the kind of woman who seemed to carry the world in her hands, and still smiled through the chaos. At 35 years old, she lived in Bardstown, Kentucky, a small town marked by rural landscapes and tight-knit relationships. A devoted mother of 5, she was the emotional pillar of her home, balancing motherhood with a turbulent relationship and an uncertain future. Friends and family described her as sweet, reliable, and generous. But Crystal also had a quiet strength, a will to keep going, even when everything around her seemed to be falling apart. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Crystal showed signs of restlessness. Though she kept up the appearance of stability in public, there were recurring arguments with her boyfriend Brooks Houck, who was also the father of her youngest child. They lived together, but the atmosphere at home had shifted. Her family, especially her mother, Sherry Ballard, sensed growing tension, yet Crystal rarely complained. She chose to shield her children, preserve routine, and hold on to the hope that things would get better. Motherhood was Crystal's purpose. She went to her children's games, cooked home meals, helped with homework, and dreamed of a more stable future. Despite financial and emotional challenges, she made sure to be present in every detail of their lives. Her disappearance was not just a physical absence. It was the loss of the center of the family's warmth. Her children, of different ages, were left not only with invisible grief, but with the unbearable silence that her absence created. Crystal also had strong ties to her extended family. She was close to her siblings, had an inseparable bond with her mother, and often visited her grandparents. Her father, Tommy Ballard, became the public face of the search after she vanished, a reflection of the love that united the family. They all insisted Crystal would never leave her children voluntarily. She wasn't the kind of woman who would just walk away. Something terrible had happened, and they all felt it. Bardstown, already marked by other unsolved crimes, seemed to swallow another senseless story. But unlike other forgotten victims, Crystal left behind traces, not in forensic evidence, but in the collective memory of an entire town. She wasn't just a name on a missing person poster. She was a living presence, and her absence, that's why no one close to her was willing to accept silence as an answer. On the night of July 3, 2015, Crystal was last seen with her boyfriend, Brooks Houck. According to him, after spending the evening together at his family farm, she left the next morning and never returned. The story, told with apparent ease by Brooks, never convinced her family. For them, something was deeply wrong. Crystal would never go that long without contacting her children, never failed to say where she was. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Messages were unread. The silence was immediate and cruel. 5 days later, Crystal's car was found abandoned on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway, with a flat tire. Inside was something chilling: her phone, her purse, and her keys, all untouched. Nothing seemed stolen. There were no visible signs of violence, but the scene felt staged, set up to make it look like she had simply vanished. For Crystal's mother, it was like looking into a capsule of despair. Everything was there, except her daughter. Local authorities treated the case with painful slowness. The car was towed, but few immediate steps were taken in the critical hours that followed. No roadblockades were set up, No scent-tracking dogs were dispatched right away. The scene was cleared before a detailed forensic review could be conducted. The lack of urgency frustrated the family, who began searching for answers on their own. To Sherry Ballard, every second lost was one less chance of finding her daughter alive. Brooks Houck's behavior soon raised eyebrows. He didn't join the search efforts, refused media interviews, and kept his distance from Crystal's family. When called in for questioning, his brother, Nick Houck, a local police officer, intervened, calling Brooks during the interview to warn him not to cooperate. From that point on, this wasn't just a missing person case, it was a possible cover-up. In those early days, the case wavered between hope and fear. Volunteers put up posters, organized vigils, searched fields and forests, but the lack of solid leads turned the disappearance into a growing shadow. Something had happened that night, and the answers, perhaps, were very close, hidden behind a wall of silence. And beyond that wall, time was already eating away at the hope for justice. As days turned into weeks, the investigation into Crystal Rogers' disappearance revealed not just a lack of answers, but a growing trail of contradictions. Official statements began to collapse under their own detail. Brooks Houck claimed that he and Crystal were together at his family farm the night she disappeared, and that she left alone the next morning, leaving everything behind. A version that felt thin, almost detached from the beginning. Brooks's behavior during police questioning stood out. Investigators noted that he seemed more concerned with protecting his image than finding the mother of his child. He gave vague answers, lacked emotion, and showed little urgency. When asked why he wasn't helping with the search, he said he wanted to avoid confusion. But to Crystal's family, that absence was loud, a kind of silence that said more than words ever could. Then came Nick Houck, Brooks's brother and a Bardstown police officer. During Brooks's first interrogation, Nick called him mid-interview to tell him not to talk. He believed the police were trying to frame Brooks, and warned him to be careful. This interference didn't just damage Nick's credibility, it sent shockwaves through the investigation. A line had been crossed, and now, obstruction of justice was on the table. Another red flag emerged when reports surfaced about a white Buick belonging to Brooks's grandmother. Witnesses said it had been seen leaving the Houck family farm the night Crystal vanished. When the vehicle was finally examined, no obvious evidence was found. But when the grandmother was subpoenaed to testify, she invoked her right not to speak. That silence, too, spoke volumes. Despite these alarming signs, the investigation remained slow. No arrests, no formal charges. The case stayed open, drifting between cold leads and unanswered calls. Crystal's family pushed forward on their own, searching fields, posting flyers, organizing fundraisers. What became clear was this: valuable information was being withheld. Versions were being rehearsed, and the truth, whatever it was, had been carefully buried. Years passed, with no answers, until 2020, when the FBI officially took over the case. What had long been handled as a local tragedy suddenly gained the weight of a federal investigation. With it came fresh eyes, deeper resources, and a new sense of urgency. For the first time, silence was no longer an option. In 2021, the FBI conducted excavations at a property in Woodlawn Springs, a subdivision connected to the Houck family. Drones, ground-penetrating radar, and forensic units searched for days. Officials remained tight-lipped, but insiders confirmed that items of interest were recovered. That operation reignited hope in the Ballard family and sent a clear signal: the truth was closer than ever. At the same time, informants began coming forward. Among them were Joseph Lawson and his father Stephen Lawson. They told investigators they had helped move something late at night near Cox's Creek, under instructions they claimed from someone else. The FBI treated the tip cautiously, but it triggered further searches and helped solidify a new theory. This had never been a solo crime. It had been a plan. Digital forensics also played a critical role. Cell phone pings, text messages, bank records, and location data were reanalyzed. Patterns emerged. Movements were reconstructed. And inconsistencies in Brooks Houck's timeline became impossible to ignore. The FBI was building a quiet, calculated case, not based on what was said, but on what could no longer be denied. Throughout all this, Crystal's family stayed relentless. Her mother gave interviews. Her brother organized search parties. Her father, Tommy Ballard, had been murdered in 2016, shot while hunting with his grandson, a crime many believe was connected to Crystal's case. The pain only deepened their resolve. They had lost 2 family members, but they would not lose the truth. The silence that once protected the guilty had started to crack. The pieces were finally falling into place, and what was once a mystery was becoming a case ready for justice. September 27, 2023, marked a turning point in a case that had long seemed forgotten. Brooks Houck, Crystal's boyfriend and the father of her youngest child, was formally arrested and charged with her murder and tampering with physical evidence. After more than 8 years of speculation, suspicion, and silence, the name everyone had whispered finally stood at the center of a criminal indictment. The charges were built on a web of digital evidence, timeline inconsistencies, financial records, and long-buried testimony. Among the names that emerged was Joseph Lawson, now charged with conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice. His statements, once sealed in secrecy, became key in reconstructing the events of that night and the cover-up that followed. In July 2025, the trial began. After only 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty. Brooks Houck was convicted without a body, without DNA, and without a murder weapon. It was a victory built on testimony, digital forensics, and a meticulous timeline, all pointing to the same truth the Ballard family had insisted on from day one. The trial captured national attention. News outlets aired footage of Brooks entering court in handcuffs, a stark contrast to his years of defiance and emotional detachment. The prosecution's message was clear: justice is still possible, even when evidence is invisible. It was a landmark conviction, not just for Bardstown, but for any case built on circumstantial proof and unwavering persistence. At the end of the hearing, the lead prosecutor said, "Today we proved that time does not erase the truth. It only buries it, until someone has the courage to dig." That's exactly what had happened. After years of shadows, Crystal Rogers' case had stepped into the light. The convictions of Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson brought relief to many, but not closure. For Crystal's family, it was the confirmation of what they had always known. She didn't walk away. She didn't vanish by choice, and the people responsible had been hiding in plain sight. The judge recommended a life sentence for Brooks and 25 years for Lawson. Yet even with justice served in court, some wounds remain wide open. Inside the courtroom, grief met dignity. Crystal's teenage daughter addressed the jury, pleading that her mother not be forgotten. Her brother spoke through tears, recalling the promise made to their father, a promise that at last had been fulfilled. But Crystal's absence still hangs heavy. Her body was never found, and without it, there's no real goodbye. Only an empty space that justice couldn't fill. There's also the unresolved murder of Tommy Ballard, Crystal's father, who was shot and killed in 2016 while hunting with his grandson. Many believe his death is directly tied to his efforts to find his daughter. But no one has ever been charged. No arrests. No closure. So while justice was achieved for Crystal, other parts of the story remain shrouded in silence. Bardstown has changed too. Once known for its small-town charm, it now carries the weight of unsolved tragedy. Crystal's case, though finally resolved in court, was part of a string of mysterious crimes that scarred the community. And while the verdict brought accountability, it could not erase the years of fear, suspicion, and heartbreak. Still, it offered a glimmer of hope that truth, even when buried, can rise. The arrests of Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson didn't rewrite the past, but they proved that the present can still be changed. When people speak, when families fight, and when silence is no longer accepted. Crystal Rogers, though gone, continues to inspire a pursuit for justice that doesn't end with a verdict. Because real justice isn't only about who gets punished, it's about who never gets forgotten. The case of Crystal Rogers is a painful reminder of how long it can take for truth to emerge and how silence often protects the guilty more than any alibi. For nearly a decade, Crystal's family faced closed doors, quiet suspicions, and the brutal absence of answers. But they never gave up. And it was their persistence that turned a disappearance into a cry for justice that the system could no longer ignore. Crystal was not forgotten, even without a body, even as time chipped away at hope. She lived on in her mother's efforts, her children's voices, and her father's final mission, a mission that cost him his life. But justice came, late, imperfect, painful, but real, and with it came the lesson that asking questions, digging deeper, and refusing to let go matters. If this video moved you, share it, like it, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what else needs to be uncovered in the Crystal Rogers case. Because Crystal, like so many others, deserves to be remembered, not for what was taken from her, but for the strength her story continues to awaken.